Here's a fundamental truth. Characters make or break a story. Not the plot, not the writing, not the setting. Not the originality of the premise. The characters. If you can't write compelling characters, it doesn't matter how good everything else is, your story won't resonate with readers. So, how do you write compelling characters? Today I'm going to teach you the 5-step process that I vouch for. Let's go. I used to really believe that what made a story good was how good the actual writing was, like how smart and clever the prose was and how many big or impressive words the writer used. It's kind of embarrassing to admit that, but I did. Funny thing is, I wasn't actually thinking like a reader when I made that assumption. As a reader, I didn't actually pay much attention to the writing itself as I read. I certainly didn't care about how big or impressive the words an author used were. I just, wanted to be carried away by the story. It took me years of writing and rewriting my first draft of my first book to understand that the story wasn't told in the writing itself. That sounds crazy, I know, so I'm going to say it again. The story isn't told in the writing itself. The story is in the heart of the work, and that comes from the characters. The words and sentences are just the means to get there. So let's talk about how to write compelling characters. Step number 1, don't spend forever creating elaborate character bios before you start writing. Back when I was a newbie working on the first draft of my first novel, I took some writing class, I used to take tons of them, where we were given the assignment to write 100 sentences about each of our characters. And I did it because I was all about being a good student, but first of all, it took forever. And when I finished, I wasn't really sure why I had done it. I'd kind of just come up with a random list of facts about my characters, like her favorite food is French fries and she likes to bike. Like, what? I mean, were those even true? I supposed so, since she was a fictional character who I was creating, so I had the authority to make them true, but it felt like the opposite of creativity. I hadn't been inspired while I was making this list. It had felt totally removed from creative inspiration. In fact, I'd been pretty bored at certain points. I'd not really known what standard to use in coming up with these random facts, and so I had just made a list of facts and then didn't know what even to do with them. I since have discovered that for myself, this kind of exercise is pretty pointless. Coming up with character biographies in a vacuum rather than letting the qualities of characters emerge from my subconscious through the story itself is a waste of my time. It's kind of weird, it's awkward, and so much of these kind of bios, you don't even need to know. I've never put my character's favorite color in one of my books or where they graduated from high school. So I say, let their biography emerge in the story organically, and then creative inspiration is at the wheel. When I tell writers I work with in my program, the Book Incubator, this, they say, but don't I need to know something about my characters before I start? Like something? And yes, you actually do. And that brings me to my next point. Step number 2. Step number 2 is to give them a want. This is really important for giving your novel an engine from page 1. What do they want that they cannot easily get? A coffee? A cigarette? A kiss? All fine. The love of their father who abandoned them 20 years ago? Also fine. It doesn't matter if it's small or big. It just needs to be something. And it should be something that they can't easily get. Now, the writers I work with will often say, but Mary, isn't this contrived? Just like you said, those bios were contrived. Yes, but we have to start with something contrived because we have to start somewhere. And the best way to get to know your character is to name something they want and can't get, and then watch them try to get it and see where that takes you. But that's not your only strategy. Step number 3 is to give them a secret. Can you remember the last time you heard a secret about someone? I can, and it was juicy. And I'm not going to share it here because I really am thinking of someone and something. When we learn about secrets, people immediately become more complex and interesting to us. And I imagine you can think of similar situations. Whenever writers tell me they're having trouble relating to a character or accessing a character or that the character is falling flat, this is my first recommendation. Give them a secret. And the amazing thing about this strategy is that it makes the character more interesting to you too as the writer. So you're less likely to get bored writing and less likely to lose steam. When I was working on my first novel, its title is When You Read This, I had this character. His name was Smith. Very vanilla name for a very vanilla man. He was supposed to be vanilla. He was passive, kind of uninteresting, everyman. But because I was writing a character who was passive and uninteresting on purpose, he was also falling kind of flat. So over and over, I got the feedback that Smith is just kind of not interesting enough. He's falling flat. The readers who I was sharing my book draft with were having trouble connecting with him. So I thought about it and I realized something. Passive people are not actually passive. They just appear passive. They're actually usually very active internally because they're turning conflict inward, whereas other people are turning it outward. So we don't see that conflict, but it is definitely present internally for them and often does manifest in some way in private. So I wondered, how could Smith have a private manifestation of his anxiety? I gave him a secret. It was a gambling addiction. And like that, for me, he came to life. What's a cool secret a character could have? Share in the comments below. And before I share my last 2 steps for developing characters, I just want to invite you to apply for my program, The Book Incubator. The link is down below this video. It's just 2 questions, takes less than 5 minutes. And if you're writing a book, you're definitely going to want to check it out. Step number 4 is to give them a backstory. A backstory is different from an elaborate character bio that you write outside of your draft before you even start it. Think of a backstory as personal history that explains why a character is the way they are. It's a fun thing for me as a writer to discover a character's backstory. And I think if you're someone else who finds psychology fascinating, and I find that many writers do, you're probably going to enjoy this part too. You get to explore, why is this person the way they are? In my novel, Privilege, the main character, Annie, who is 19 and a sophomore in college, is both nervous and excited about going out for the first time in a short skirt. Why? Is it a normal kind of nervousness or is it a special kind? Well, in her case, this is the first time she's gone out without her legs covered up since she was 8 years old. When she was 8, she was in an accident with a fire and her legs were burned, and she has spent the last several years of her life hiding them. That backstory gives the reader a reason to understand your character, and if they understand them, it's easier to care about them. Once we have the reader caring about our characters, their attention is ours. And step number 5 is not to worry about how much backstory you tell in your first draft. When I start working with writers who come to me from other writing programs or other writing classes, they are often terrified of backstory. They come to me thinking they aren't supposed to include any background on their characters for some reason. They've actually learned this somewhere. And it's just not true. One of the first things I have to do is liberate them from this idea by telling them to pick up any novel they love and notice that it's packed with backstory, especially the first third. Every single story you pick up that you like is packed with backstory because we need to know backstory. This is how we get to know characters. You don't have to be scared of it. The key is to make it interesting, to paint it through scenes, and to make it relevant. And to remember that you have the opportunity to edit it down later during revision. My first drafts have loads of backstory. That's just the way it is. I don't fight it and I don't worry about it. Sure, I cut some of it on revision, but that's just part of the process. Now, speaking of writers I work with, are you writing a book? Or maybe you want to write a book? Because if so, I want to hear from you. When I'm not writing, my mission in life is to help talented writers write their dream books. I love it. I live for it. If you're curious to know more, I have a free video walking you through my exact process for writing a book. You can get it by clicking below and answering 2 questions to apply to my program. You get the video whether you join or not, no pressure to enroll. Just click below, tell me a little bit about you and your book, and just fill out the form online. I'm so excited to hear from you.